In the last lesson, we had a look at this idea of the monoideistic focus. And, I really want to drive home the fact that this concept of going first in hypnosis is not about entering some trance state or going into hypnosis before your client goes into hypnosis. What it's really about is about holding this single pointed thought form of being able to help them, and any doubt, any wavering of the mind in that state has to be pushed to one side, and all of your belief needs to be engaged in the fact that you can help and will help this client overcome the problem that they have. And this is the same with ourselves. There's this idea that we need to have rapport with our clients when we work with them. This is a bit of a fallacy. We need to have rapport with their unconscious mind, not their conscious mind. That doesn't really matter. As long as their unconscious mind has rapport with us, the facilitation of the hypnotic interaction should work. But when we're dealing with self-suggestion, with self-work, which is what this basic course is really all about, and the free tier within the school here is all about this idea of healing. Part of it is so one of the things that we try to do is offer healing for free. And if you want coaching from me, this is why the paid tier is a paid tier and this is a free tier. It's because what I'm essentially doing here is giving you the healing for free. And if you want coaching in learning to do this with clients, or self mastery, that side of things, then that's all the paid tier. So with the self-healing stuff, we really need to start to think of this idea of gaining rapport with your own subconscious mind. And I'm going to do a mini course on how to do this in this free tier as well, just to sort of give you a few ideas of how to build rapport with your own unconscious mind. Because if you're constantly at odds with your unconscious and saying things like, "Oh, I'm never going to drink coffee again," and then the next day you're drinking coffee and going, "Oh shit, I'll stop tomorrow," or whatever it happens to be, smoking, drinking, whatever your vice is. If you're constantly going back and forth and then giving yourself abuse for like not managing, "Oh, you're not good, like I'm useless, I can never do things right," whatever it is, this breaks rapport with your unconscious. So when you start to give it suggestions, it's just going to go, "Well, I mean, you're giving me suggestions all the time, and then you're going completely against them. So why should I bother?" It's like this idea of a ship sailing in the ocean. If the captain is useless and constantly giving orders and then changing those orders and telling the crew to do this and then that and then telling them how stupid they are, the crew's never going to actually follow the captain's orders, and it's going to end up with a mutiny, and the crew just does what they want and sail where they want, which is what largely most people with problems in their life are actually doing. I know I've been there. My social anxiety was so bad that it took me 3.5 years to get on a bus when I moved to Edinburgh. It took me 8.5 months to get further than the shop underneath my house. I couldn't speak to people. My shyness was crippling, and I went out and worked on it every single day. I put in the effort. I've dealt with cluster headaches, the pain from cluster headaches from the age of 13 to 38. I had 4 or 5 cluster headaches a night, every night for periods of up to a year at a time. And cluster headaches are known as one of the, if not the most painful neurological condition known to man. Women that experience cluster headaches are often quoted in saying that they're worse than childbirth. So like these are really painful. I've also had lung disease. I've got COPD and emphysema. Part of my lungs are missing, scar tissue in the lower lobes, and I'm constantly pushing myself to be better, to do better. I've got to the point now where I can beat the 5 minute breath hold mark. I can do pull-ups with 20 kilos. And I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying this to show you what gaining rapport with your unconscious mind can do to your mind and your body. I'm 46 years old and my body feels like it's in its 20s now, even though I've got this disease. So the possibilities of working with yourself in this way really are limitless. So we want to try and build rapport with our unconscious mind. But we'll get onto that in a sort of a mini course as well. But this 3B, this section of the basic mesmerism course is really about the idea of controlling your presence. And it if you think of this idea that Mesmer had of the plenum, the fluid being forced through the subject until it broke through the blockage, and natural order and natural flow was maintained and continued and restarted effectively. What he was saying there might have been in this frame of a physical fluid, but in actual fact, what he was saying was something that's very much akin to the idea of presence and consciousness working in this way. You see, if we're in two minds, we have a block in the flow of that consciousness energy. You know, if our thought form is that I can help myself deal with this problem through self-suggestion, and then there's another part of my mind going, nah, this is never going to work, then that is blocking this flow of consciousness energy through my system. And you know, if you're questioning whether there's a flow of consciousness through your system, wiggle your fingers. You know, there's a signal going from your brain down your arm into your fingers and allowing you to wiggle your fingers. So this is thought forms. This is consciousness energy moving through your nervous system. And if we have a part of our mind that's going, I can't move my fingers, and another part of my mind going, I want to move my fingers, the imagination will override the will. And this is where a lot of the sort of hypnotic phenomena come from. So when we look at the ideas within presence, you know, presence isn't this thing that we need to try to do. It's something that we can allow to happen when we take away those blocks within our system. And you know, part of my presence is being aware of the fact that I'm sitting here in front of my computer and I can see the computer in front of me and my desk and my mic and the light and all this sort of stuff going on. But part of that presence is also being aware of how my internal landscape's responding to that external screen. And Vadim Zeland talks about this in Tufti, the Priestess, one of his books. I highly recommend getting this. It's a brilliant book. Um, his stuff is legendary. I got passed on to this by James Tripp, so hats off to James. He's an absolute legend in some of the stuff that he's given me over the years. So, you know, this idea that there's two screens, you know, there's the external screen that we experience and there's the internal screen that we can experience as well. When we're observing these two screens, we're essentially doing something very similar to self-hypnosis. We're becoming the observer and the observed at the same time. Because what I'm experiencing out here is actually a dream within my mind based on electrical signals going in through my senses. So when we start to understand that, this external screen that I see is a mirror of reality. It's not the reality out there. It's a mirror within my consciousness of reality. And then there's another part of my consciousness that's reacting to that world that I experience from outside. And then there's a third part observing both those screens. So we've got this really, really interesting duality split within the mind where there's the observer and the observed happening at the same time. And this is one of the ways of creating presence. So if I slip into automatic behavior, if I slip into a pattern of behavior that I've learned, like driving a car, it's very easy for me to start to think about things I need to do later on, or that conversation I had before I left work, or whatever it is, you know? And this is essentially our mind slipping into its default mode network. It's running an automated program of driving and it's thinking about something else at the same time. So the unconscious mind's busy running the program and the conscious mind's drifting off and thinking about God knows what. And before we know it, we're back home and we've forgotten to stop at the shop to buy milk. You know, this happens to everyone. And we call it highway hypnosis, but it really is a trance state where our awareness is inside, lost on the inner screen, and the external screen is being run by the unconscious pattern. Now, if something happens in the road and we need to pull ourselves back into awareness, boom, we're back there. Maybe a car has tried to overtake a lorry in front of us and almost hit us or something like that. And we're back in the world again. The default mode network shut down and gone, boom, okay, we're back. That's it pulling us back into presence naturally. And, you know, getting to a point where you can do that throughout your day and practice that is a really, really powerful thing. We need to be able to switch into that when we're doing this sort of healing work, even if we're just working with ourselves. So I'll put some drills on. There's a few things that I'm gonna put a few drills on and exercises for you guys to play with, so you can cultivate things like your focus of attention, which we covered in an earlier lesson, and the presence, which we're covering here. So keep an eye out for that. It'll be in the free tier, obviously, as well, because this is all self-healing stuff. And the next thing I want to cover is this idea that your responsiveness will change on day to day. So one day you might be tired. Maybe you didn't get a good night's sleep. Maybe the food you just ate is not sitting right. The circadian and ultradian rhythms that happen throughout the day also play a part in all of this. And this idea of hypnotizability scales, if you've come across this idea that certain people are more hypnotizable than others, is a complete fallacy. If we look at hypnosis as learning, like Milton Erickson did, then we start to understand that everyone can learn. And there's always something to learn here. And, he would say things like, in a moment, I'm going to tell you a story. And your conscious mind won't know exactly why I'm telling you this story, but your unconscious mind will understand exactly what it needs to and learn from this experience or something along those lines. So what he's really doing there is he's setting up a process where that if you do consciously think, oh, he's telling me this story for this reason, he's just told you that your conscious mind won't know the answer. So that must be wrong, because this figure of authority that knows what he's talking about has just told you that you won't know consciously. It'll be unconscious knowledge, unconscious learning. And when we understand that all of this frame of learning as hypnosis fits in so beautifully with things like the art of memory, which I teach as well, and how we build long-term memory consciously at will whenever we want, using specific techniques that tie in perfectly with post-hypnotic suggestion. So if you understand and learn the art of memory, and specifically the artificial memory techniques like Locky systems, memory palaces, and these sort of things, then you actually learn how to create better post-hypnotic suggestions in yourself and in your clients. So the hypnotizability scale is down to the rapport between you and your subconscious, or the operator and the client's subconscious, or these sort of things. And, you know, if you think about it like learning to drive, you might have a driving instructor that's really good, that suits you really well. Their teaching style fits perfectly with your learning style and you learn very quickly. You may, on the other hand, have a driving instructor that doesn't gel with you. Maybe your personalities clash or something, and he's constantly getting angry with you for making silly mistakes and things like that. You're not going to learn to drive anywhere near as well as you would with someone who's in rapport with you, who understands you, who teaches in the right style for you to learn. And as teachers, one of our jobs is to teach the student and match them where they are. If a student's not understanding what we're teaching, it's not that they're stupid, it's that we're not teaching it right for them. And this is what we're doing with hypnosis, with mesmerism. We're teaching your body, your unconscious mind, to learn a new pattern in a different way. So if what we're doing is not working, we need to alter the script. We need to change how we're delivering it and what we're delivering, so that it matches with your learning style. So this idea of this varying responsiveness, it may be that you know this is the right hypnotist for you, but it's just not the right time. And I'm a firm believer that everyone can produce all of the phenomena of hypnosis, even the what's classed as only possible for the somnambulists, the really high responders, is actually possible for everyone. All we need to do is get the recipe right for that particular session. And a lot of that is to do with things like presence and understanding that maybe this isn't the right method. Maybe it's this thing we should be doing today. Maybe if you come back in half an hour, this will work. So there's a lot of shifts and changes as to how we create that experience, create that ritual, that social setting for the the particular context of what we're doing. And this is where things like the rituals of Wicca and witchcraft and esoteric occultism and all of this sort of stuff fit in. Because if you can design a ritual that allows you to put your faith into this working for you, that's basically the hypnotic interaction. That's the hypnotic contract with your subconscious mind. And the more will and intent you're putting into designing that ritual and performing that ritual, the more likely it is to actually sit with you and cause a lasting change within your unconscious mind. So, if you read a ritual that someone else has written in a book, and it's like, oh, this is a load of crap and doesn't really work, and then you do it anyway and it doesn't really work, and you're like, yeah, that's all hokum, it doesn't work. But if you think about it and design a ritual for yourself and then start to work with that, and it's maybe like, I need to collect these specific herbs at this particular time of the moon cycle, and then do this particular operation with them. All of this is putting energy into building a thought form that your unconscious can grab hold of and take as real. So you can't control the day you've had. You can't control how you respond in this moment. But what you can do is you can build moments over time so that the responsiveness within your unconscious mind to your conscious mind's suggestion and direction starts to take hold. And this is part of the building rapport with your unconscious. It's a more complex and more advanced part than some of the stuff that we'll be teaching you in the drills, but it's still a part of this system of befriending the unconscious mind. So next, I want to just cover something that we've already touched on a little bit, is this idea that effort fights the effect. And, if we think of, if I try and lift this phone, well, I've lifted the phone, so I'm not trying anymore. I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4. Ooh, numerology. Uh, you know, it's this, the word try is a precursor to action. So using that word creates this space where it's not happened yet. And we see this in certain hypnotic procedures, especially the stage hypnosis stuff. Try and lift your hand and find that you can't. Or in things like the Elman induction, where when we're getting eye catalepsy and things like that, test to make sure they're so relaxed they just won't work. There's specific linguistic tricks that we're using in hypnosis to produce the effect of those suggestions, which then creates a novel state experience where this is different, this is unusual, this is new, which is actually what's starting to create the hypnotic effect. And one of the things here to really understand is looking at language in this way. The English language is very good for this. I'm not sure about other languages and how like how they compare in this aspect. But if I say, "Oh, we shouldn't be doing this," then there's a subtext that we're going to do it anyway. It's that thing when you're being a little bit naughty, when you're like, "Oh, we shouldn't be doing this," but we do it anyway. And try is one that says that you won't be able to. Try and lift that. And we can do this with gestures as well, like you know even just that, with the non-verbal of like, give it a try. We're speaking without words, so we're doing these somatic suggestions, these non-verbal suggestions that start to get the unconscious of the other person to question whether they're going to be able to. I was in the gym earlier, and one of the guys that's there quite regularly is this Polish guy who does like he's a lifter, a proper lifter, and like he had a pain in his knee, so I pulled the pain out of his knee, and he's had this problem with his knee for the last 10 years. So it's obviously something that's just a tension within the knee. He's had it checked out. There's nothing wrong with his knee. He had torn some ligaments in it 10 years ago. So I pulled the pain out, pulled the tension out, and he was able to do stuff that he hadn't been able to do for the last 10 years. And then I asked him if he wanted to play. And what I did was I gave him a little bit more strength so he could push a little bit harder on his reps. And then I took his strength away so he couldn't lift the weight that he'd just been lifting. And he was like, whoa. And this is just eye contact and non-verbal suggestion. So all I'm doing is a fascination induction here, and I'm doing a couple other little things here and there to create this space that allows his unconscious mind to take on this suggestion. And I'm doing it without words. So as far as he's concerned, I've not really said anything. I've just looked at him and done some stuff, and now he can't lift the weight that he could lift a second ago. And then I give him back his strength plus a little bit more, so he can actually, because we've always got a little bit in the tank. So I give him his strength back and a little bit more, and he can lift a heavier weight than he's been able to lift. And he's like, this stuff really works, you know? And this is the sort of stuff that you can do when you get into this properly and learn the sort of the working with others side of things. So, if we have an effort, if I'm trying to get him to not be able to lift something, that's not going to work. I need to let that consciousness energy flow through me in a way that allows that suggestion to flow through me and into him. And there's this old poem by A. Victor Segnal. I hold it true that thoughts are things endowed with bodies, breath, and wings, and that we send them forth to fill the world with good results or ill. That which we call our secret thought speeds to the earth's remotest spot and leaves behind it as it goes its blessings or its woes. We awaken in another just the thoughts our minds contain. If we're kind, we win their kindness. If we hate, they hate again. We pass on to brothers mortal the vibrations of the soul, and the knowing ones receive them as they search from pole to pole. We build our futures thought by thought, or good or bad, and know it not, yet so the universe is wrought. Thought is another name for fate. Choose then thy destiny and wait, for love brings love and hate brings hate. And what is he saying here? He's saying that we awaken in another just the thoughts our minds contain. If we look at this in modern scientific terms, if we're in a particular state and holding that state in a strong frame of mind and able to hold that thought form in a monoideistic focus, like we spoke about in the last lesson, then we can actually trigger the mirror neurons within the other individual. And we can see this really clearly in things like the yawn. Even just reading the word yawn or having someone talking about yawning quite often makes people yawn. And you might find that you're actually wanting to yawn just now. You maybe feel it in your jaw muscles here. Maybe you have actually yawned yourself. And that's fine. That's just proving that these mirror neurons work. The same thing happens when we start to think about a lemon. We tend to start to salivate. So this is a response within our system based on a thought. And if I'm holding a strong state, if you have a friend that's just always full of fun and playful energy and smiling, it's hard to feel depressed around. Conversely, if you have a friend who's constantly in a funk, if you don't hold your state well when you're around them, there's a good chance that you get pulled into their funk. This is mirror neurons at play. This is mesmerism at play. This is fascination at play. This is the creation of these thought forms within the individual that are so powerful because they've practiced them for so many years. They've got good at feeling depressed or anxious or whatever it happens to be. And you're maybe one of these people. So, this is where we start to take conscious control. All of these things that you've learned through your life, through either conscious will and attention or through the happenstance of the universe around you, they're locked into your unconscious mind. And unless you start to control and program in different ways of being, different patterns of behavior, the results that you're getting in the world will stay the same. If you keep doing what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. change the script, change the pattern. And this is what this is really about. So, you know, do it effortlessly. Don't try and fight it. Don't try and do something. Just relax into it. You know, the there's this there's a client that I've got, and he is actually having difficulty driving. And you know, you'll talk to him about, you know, potentially ways of dealing with this, and he will constantly engage his critical faculty and go, but there's this problem, but there's this problem, but this makes it not work. This is the reason it won't work for me. This is the reason it won't work for me. This is the reason it won't work for me. So he's got this part of his mind, this watcher that's commentating and then testing to see for failure instead of acting as if. And if we look at like Edison with his light bulb, you know, he built a light bulb, it didn't work. If he'd have then looked at all the reasons why light bulbs won't work, he would have stopped trying to build them. Instead, he said, okay, that's one way I know that it won't work. I've eliminated one possible variable. What's the next one? What's the next one? What's the next one? And he keeps trying. And so he's not necessarily trying to make a light bulb work. He's trying to find all the ways that it can't work. So the only option left is the way that it does work. And, you know, this is what we need to do. We need to basically enter into a state of beginner's mind where all of the beliefs that are saying this won't work for me or this is hokum, this is bullshit, and put them to one side and go, but what if? And re-engage that curiosity of a child. You know, when you were a child, you know, I don't know to be honest, but for me, when I was a child, I sat in wonder at how the clouds with their kilograms of water stayed floating in the sky. I had wonder at how bees and birds flew. You know, I wondered if the idea of levitation was a real thing. You know, you see these magicians on TV levitating and things like that. And there's a part of me that's like, is that possible? What if it was? You know, what if we could transmute lead into gold just by using our mind in a certain way? What if the thought forms that we can create can be so powerful that they change the map of reality out there? And as we get older and we get more fixed in our ways and we get taught that, oh no, that's all just like the delusions of childhood, we forget about these things. But you can, at any point, decide to just put on a belief in any way you want to. They're faith based. We can step into them, try them out, put them on like a piece of clothing. If it doesn't fit, then we can take it off again. It's fine. It doesn't change who we are. You're not your beliefs. You're aware of them. And you're aware of them changing over time. There's maybe a time when you read a book and learned something new that you didn't believe before. Or that moment where you get taught that Santa's actually just your dad or your mum filling the stocking at night. Or the tooth fairy doesn't really exist. And all of these things that we learn, you know, they shift and change our beliefs. So we're not our beliefs. We're not what we believe we are. Those beliefs are just something that we have, and we can put them down and pick up different ones whenever we want. And being able to do that when you want with the beliefs that suit the situation that you're in this moment is one of the most powerful things you can learn to do. It's not just your belief. You know, you're aware of your persona and the different personas you have with your friends, with your family, with your lovers, with your work colleagues. You know, all of these things shift and change. So we're aware of the masks we wear. You're aware of your emotions. The moment that you get angry at something someone said, or the moment you start laughing for no reason because someone just did something so absurd, or whatever it happens to be, that awareness lies beyond and before the emotions, before the beliefs, before the persona, before your body. I'm aware of this body, but if I lose my arm, it's no less me. My body is missing a part, but my me isn't. My being isn't. All of this is really just an awareness sitting behind all of these things, experiencing life and playing in the universe. And when you start to really get that, you can start to really shift your life in any way you want because you can just be. Shakespeare said, all the world's a play. And one of the ideas with that was this idea that we're acting all the time. But another way of looking at that is instead of reacting, we learn how to act at will. And this is where this all starts to really fit in. So, learn how to flow into these different beliefs. Put them on like a hat. Slide into them. Slide into presence. Let go of the story in your mind. Be aware of the two screens. What's going on out there and what's going on in here. And the next thing is this idea that touch changes our state. Now, there's an argument in conventional hypnosis of state versus non-state theory. And I want you to really think about that for a moment because there is absolutely no place within the entire human condition, probably within the entire world, where state does not follow suggestion. There is never, as far as I can see, and I've searched, a position where state goes first. You're asleep, right? Your alarm goes off, a suggestion to wake up. Your state changes to being awake. Your bladder fills up. There's a suggestion of pressure. You go to the toilet. All of the things that we experience as different states of being. A state of anxiety doesn't appear out of nowhere. There's a suggestion within ourself, within the environment that's running a program that triggers the anxiety. All of these things, the state follows the suggestion in every single way. And one of the most common state shifts through touch that we do is the rub in the back of the neck. Now, if we know about body language, there's various different clusters of body language. So a nose touch, that's a fake covering of the mouth, and then an ear rub, and then back of the neck is, I shouldn't be telling this is a lie. Have they heard me? Oh, I need some comfort. And this is associated with your mother holding you as a child. And this that we're finding in havening, if you're dealing with someone that's stressed, you grab them by the shoulders and go, "It's okay, calm down, it's okay, got you." And you shift your your voice, so it's like, "It's okay." So you start off at their pacing, and then you lead them into a calmer state by slowly lowering your voice and calming down and slowing down as you're touching this part of their body. So, touching and the sensory pathways that are engaged by self-touch actually cause a shift within our entire system. And again, this is a suggestion in our physiological system. It's a somatic suggestion that causes a shift within our psychology, within our biology. So the whole thing works. This is the passes of Mesmer, the havening passes. And, touching on the head. What do you do when you've got a headache? You touch yourself on the head. This is used in havening, it's used in mesmerism. So all of these things, the reality of it is that we are constantly responding to the suggestions of the world around us. And we can choose to start to engage that in specific ways that are more beneficial. Now, a lot of you have probably heard of things like EMDR, right? So the eye movements, and Paul McKenna talks about this, that the lateral eye movements are actually the important ones. Why is that? Why does this lateral eye movement create a shift when we're dealing with trauma? And one of the things that happens when you push your eyes to the far left or the far right, or even roll them up in your head, and if you do this just now, if you close your eyes and push them as far as you can to the left or right, you should start to salivate. And that's actually your optic nerve putting pressure on your vagus nerve and causing a parasympathetic arousal, a peace response to happen within the system. So this is a somatic suggestion of a pressure within the nervous system creating a shift within the state of the organism. Now, if we're thinking about our trauma while we're triggering parasympathetic arousal through this eye movement, is that enough to change the pattern of behavior? To start to teach the body that this isn't dangerous, that this is safe, that everything's okay? Because we're triggering that peace response while we're thinking about the problem. You see what I mean? So we can start to hack these different somatic suggestions. And they're not just external touch, they're internal touch. If you've got a negative self-talk going on, if you cock your tongue to the top of your mouth, you can't really speak very. So if you put your tongue up where they say, oh yeah, if you do this, it connects the meridians. Does it? Who knows? But what it does do is it stops you being able to talk. And the weird thing is that internal dialogue shuts down a little bit as well when you do that. Try it and see. And so we can use these different ways of triggering self-suggestion through touch, through these little somatic tricks to change the way our system's running in the moment. So the last section of this is what control really means. And I hope you've got from this that the control of presence doesn't mean you're being like super stiff or like willing yourself into this moment here now and experiencing just this moment. No, you're just relaxing into it and experiencing the world that you're experiencing and experiencing the internal response to that world. And if you're doing that, if you're being aware of seeing this world and experiencing this world, then you're not in the default mode network. You're not drifting and thinking about something else while your brain's running a pattern. It's like doing things like brushing your teeth with the wrong hand. You're forced into this, having to focus on the external screen of where your toothbrush is and the internal screen of how that feels and how to control the muscles and things like that. So it pulls you into this state of presence. Changing which chair you automatically walk into in the room and sit down on also does that. You know, if I'm constantly walking down and sitting in this chair, that becomes a pattern of behavior. If then I remove and move the living room around so everything's in different places, I can't run that automated pattern anymore. So I'm more likely to be able to stay into a state of presence. So I'll leave it there just now because I need to jump off this and jump on the live call that we've got in 5 minutes. But in the next video, we'll start to look at the idea of focusing your attention and fascination, fixation, and things like that. And then we'll start to get into some actual exercises for you to develop these things yourself on a day-to-day basis. So you can start putting in the effort and doing the daily drills and getting this stuff locked in to allow you to start to facilitate change within your own system.